Hello Inform Scotland followers and friends. This is the video accompaniment to the data blog that I put up yesterday on the informscotland.uk website. It's dated the 21st of September, and finally we have some good news. Cases are absolutely plummeting, which I've shown in the first graph. Faster than they went up in this fifth wave of coronavirus. Now, in a true epidemic, cases can't come down faster than they went up, but that's what we're seeing here. So you can tell from this that there is, to an extent, a testemic going on here, although I think it's silly to suggest that there hasn't been any COVID around at all. In the second graph that I've added, I've put in, I was saying because there's so much good news, I was adding some more info to today's blog. And I was inspired by graphs that I was sharing at this time last year about deaths and cases and how they compare. So I've put in the first graph here, I've put in the whole pandemic. Deaths are on the right-hand axis and cases are on the left. So deaths are the red trace and cases are the blue trace. What you can see is that in the first wave, which you can also see down here, there is a corresponding increase in deaths, or increase and peak in deaths going with cases. So we were finding with our testing positive cases, which indicate, or were a good indicator of serious disease because deaths matched. You can see that there. You can see that we weren't doing very much testing for, compared to the number of deaths we had. Then in waves 2 and 3, you can see again similarly an increase in deaths which corresponded with an increase in positive cases, which makes sense. But there was a little bit of a case-demic going on here, or test-demic, because we were doing so much testing, we weren't correcting for false positives, so it has been jumbled up a bit here, and I think that the testing strategy wasn't great then. This waves 4 and 5, you can see that the testing strategy is only worsening, because we have a double peak in cases here in the blue line, and it's not corresponding to an increase in deaths in the same way. What you're seeing is a little bit of testing, a lot of testing, and an awful lot of testing, and then fewer deaths as the wave goes on as well, or as the waves progress. So that was the first wave here on the same axis plotted. Here are waves 2 and 3. Now look at cases, blue, compared to deaths, red, there. Do you see how much less deadly COVID became apparently? Of course, it wasn't that much less deadly. It was because we were doing more targeted testing. And then look at waves 4 and 5 here. Can you see deaths on that, on the x-axis? You can't really, because they are so small compared to the number of positive cases that we're getting. And that might indicate that the disease is becoming much less severe, maybe because of vaccination. Or maybe we're just doing way too much testing, or maybe a bit of both. But if I plot waves 4 and 5 on two different axes, this is what you see. So you see here we've got an increasing number of deaths all the time. I've got the double peak in cases, which doesn't seem to have much to do at all with deaths. Our positive percentage rate is coming down, and it's coming down very fast. That's a good sign. Hopefully we're done. Newly tested individuals are also starting to fall again after that horrible peak that we saw up here. Hopefully that will also be continuing. It started to fall down, but it's very variable day to day. Hospital occupancy also seems to be flattening, which is good news. That's the blue trace. Deaths are still rising, but we should hopefully see them start to come down. You can see that the yellow line, which is deaths, has followed hospital occupancy previously, so I think it should flatten off now, and then hopefully it will start to decline. But look at that increase in delayed discharges. So recently we had a 50% increase in the number of delayed discharges. That's people in hospital with no clinical reason to be there, and they cause a bit of congestion in the rest of the hospital, as I understand it. Graph 5 shows again how the testing strategy has become a bit untethered, or true disease is becoming a bit untethered to positive tests, which again might be a good sign that the vaccine is working to reduce serious illness. This graph, hospital occupancy in 2020 compared to 2021, has been, to my mind, a little bit worrying, because coronaviruses are seasonal, and you would not expect, 2021 is the red trace, you would not expect to see so much more in the way of hospitalisation at this time of year compared to last year. However, I was at a meeting yesterday and somebody gave a really good explanation of what was going on here, which was quite reassuring. So let me share it with you. They were saying that this coronavirus doesn't seem to be as seasonal as other coronaviruses have been. And so what you see here is two peaks roughly 4 months apart. So we saw a peak in hospital occupancy like end of January, beginning of February, and then we saw another, this year, and then we've seen another peak in July, and then we've seen a further peak in September. But it's almost like the second wave, we're getting sort of double waves now subsequent to that first one. What they were saying though is these two peaks and these two peaks appear to be a similar distance in time apart, and that what has happened is the Delta wave has come in from India. It's more suited to warm weather, so people have become susceptible and they've gone to hospital. And because we are so open now compared to last year, which I have some doubts about, I think we're pretty much living the same now as we were this time last year, but let's say that's true, and for whatever reason the Delta variant has been much more transmissible, so we've had way more infections, and that has meant that obviously we've got more people in hospital. But the fact does remain that deaths and hospitalisations per case are way down, which they are claiming is because of the vaccine. Now, if that's true, that's absolutely brilliant, and it explains perfectly why we are in this situation. And what I would say, which is what we should remember, because we've been caught out with this before, if this is true, that the Delta variant is so much more transmissible and it's made it to so many more people, I certainly know a lot of people who are sick with COVID just now, or have been, it's reached so many more people. So immunity must have been acquired in a large section of the population by now. And that means that we should, because natural immunity is longer lasting than the vaccine immunity, this is not in dispute. All the evidence is in. Our Office for National Statistics has said it. The data from Israel show it. So that should mean that we're done here, that we're going to see hospitalizations fall, we're going to see deaths fall, and it's done, it's over. Because sufficient immunity has been acquired in the community. And even vaccinated people now are getting COVID, so they should be acquiring a natural immunity as well, and hopefully with less serious disease. And Bob's your uncle, we're done. So remember that we shouldn't have that many more vulnerable people in our population left to get COVID. Either that, or the more alarming concern might be that these vaccines are leaky, and that they're making some people in the population much more susceptible to new variants. That could be happening as well, but that's a more complicated story. And I much prefer the first story that I just gave you there. So that explanation is great. Here we have deaths. So deaths in 2020, deaths in 2021, 2020 is blue, 2021 is red, and you can see again that they've been higher than they were last summer. We've not had the same prolonged period of zero deaths that we had in 2020, and they maybe seem to be peaking. because I use 7-day averages and because at the weekends we basically report no COVID deaths, it's incredibly difficult to make predictions day to day about what deaths are doing, but it looks like they're maybe peaking or flattening. Maybe, hopefully they're not going to continue to rise. And really, the other graphs, I've explained them all before. In the next few graphs, you're perfectly capable of working them out for yourself. I've returned in graphs 11 and 12 to old graphs that I used to use, which are positive tests to death. So because I was looking at the positive tests to death in that wee suite of graphs that I added further up the page, and also because of what I was just saying about the Delta variant being less deadly or the vaccine making a difference, maybe a combination of the two, I've put this up. So we discovered in the second and third waves especially that basically, so that's waves 2, 3, 4 and 5, we've discovered that there seems to be an 18-day lag on average from positive test to death. That's how long it takes for you to die after getting a positive test, if you're going to die, which of course the vast majority of people do not. And so again, I've got deaths on the right-hand axis and positive tests on the left, and deaths are the red trace. So what you see is matching peaks, which is because it's still, even now, apparently taking 18 days from positive test to death. That's not changed. What has changed is that it looks like you've got a lot more deaths to positive test. That's because there are two different axes. But what you see is that relationship has flipped. And again, this is what I'm saying, we're doing an awful lot more testing. We're getting an awful lot more positive tests to find the deaths, the COVID deaths. There'll be a combination of things there. It might be the vaccines making the disease less deadly, brilliant. It might be that we're just doing way more testing now than we used to and less targeted, which would also have the same effect, especially if you don't correct for false positives. Or it could be that this variant is just less deadly, which is the normal course for viruses. This next graph is positive tests to ITU, occupancy, and again, you see the red line used to be higher than the blue line and now that's swapped. So it's basically the same conclusion. In graph 13, I've got ITU occupancy by region. Now, this graph is very noisy and it's not that easy to read, but basically what you're seeing is that apart from in Glasgow, which is that top blue trace, we're basically seeing a similar amount of activity in ITU now in waves 4 and 5 as we've seen in waves 1, 2 and 3. So in terms, we've got a lot more infections, but in terms of absolute number of people in ITU, the numbers are similar. So if the ITU departments were struggling in waves 1, 2 and 3, they'll be struggling now. And hospital with COVID occupancy, you can see similar story. Actually, the numbers are comparable to what we've seen in previous waves. And then we've got vaccinations. Actually, recently we've had a bit of a surge in first doses. You can't really see it. That's the first doses are the blue. We have had a bit more first doses happening recently, but the number of second doses is falling because as you you eventually run out of people left to get a second dose. That is all I have to say. I can't believe I've spoken for nearly 14 minutes. I just wanted to share with you that explanation about the hospital occupancy this year compared to last year, because I've been concerned about that, and it was interesting to hear this other explanation and a bit more reassuring. And basically it might suggest that if we're seeing peaks, this person was saying generally around the world you're seeing peaks happening about 4 months apart, well, it might be that we can expect to see another peak in 4 months, so that would be in January. But hopefully these peaks should become ever smaller, both in hospital occupancy and deaths and in infections, you would think, because there's only so many people in the population to catch a virus anyway, and now we've surely exposed so many people that we must be nearing the end. Do you like my When Harry Met Meghan t-shirt? This is one of my favourites. I'm a big fan of Harry and Meghan's. I was delighted when they got married. I'm sure you all feel the same. Lots of love. Stay sane, stay strong, stay tuned. Bye.